It started with a rustle in the bushes, then a pair of amber eyes emerged. When 26-year-old Emma Harding stepped outside her family cabin near Flagstaff, she thought it was just a stray cat. But what followed her home wasn't a cat at all, it was a bobcat cub. Wild. Alone. And impossibly attached to her. Everyone in town said it was impossible. Dangerous. But what happened over the next few weeks changed not only Emma's life, but challenged everything we thought we knew about the line between wild and tame. And it all began with one step out the door. Sometimes, healing doesn't knock, it wanders in on silent paws. Nestled in the shadow of the San Francisco peaks, on the edge of the Coconino National Forest, a small log cabin stood in the quiet hush of early spring. The trees around it were tall and proud, ponderosa pines that swayed gently in the mountain breeze, whispering secrets only the forest could understand. Emma Harding pushed open the creaking wooden door, stepping barefoot onto the wraparound porch. The morning air was crisp, laced with the scent of pine and damp earth. At 26, Emma looked far younger than the pain she carried. Her sun-freckled face was soft, her wide hazel eyes thoughtful, and her shoulder-length chestnut hair was usually tied in a loose braid that fell over one shoulder. She was tall, slender, with the lean strength of someone used to hiking trails and splitting her own firewood. It had been 2 months since she left the chaos of Phoenix behind. 2 months since she packed her old Subaru, left a toxic relationship, and abandoned the buzzing concrete world for this remote patch of Arizona wilderness, her late grandmother's cabin. It was meant to be a short break. A reset. But something about the silence, the slowness, had made her stay. Her days were simple. Coffee brewed in a dented enamel pot. Mornings spent in the greenhouse planting cherry tomatoes and basil. Afternoons curled up in the wicker chair with a sketchbook in her lap and graphite smudges on her fingertips. She sketched birds at the feeder, finches, flickers, jays. She hiked down to Walnut Creek with a journal tucked under her arm, jotting down half-thought poems and memories she hadn't dared speak aloud. The world she'd escaped was fast, loud, demanding. This place, in contrast, offered her something she hadn't realized she craved: stillness. There were no honking cars or buzzing phones. Just the whisper of wind in the pines and the occasional howl of coyotes far off at night. Sometimes, loneliness crept in like fog, especially in the hours before dusk. But the land itself seemed to hold her, to cradle her grief and whisper, "You're not alone." And so Emma stayed. Not quite healed. Not quite broken. Suspended in that fragile place between. But all that changed the day something rustled the ferns just beyond her porch steps. A presence stirred. Not imagined. Not human. And it would change everything. It's not always the loud arrivals that change your life, sometimes it's a quiet gaze from the edge of the trees. The evening light had turned golden, slipping like honey between the pine branches as Emma knelt beside her compost bin. She was sifting through the heap for usable mulch, her fingers stained with soil, when she heard it, a soft rustle in the brush. She froze. It wasn't the wind. This was deliberate, close. Turning slowly, Emma scanned the tree line. Her heart kicked once, then steadied. About 20 feet away, in the fading light, a small creature crouched between two boulders. At first glance, it looked like a stray cat. Thin, maybe malnourished. Its fur was short and speckled, ears pointed and tufted at the tips. Then their eyes met. Amber. Fierce. Wild. She sucked in a breath. This wasn't a house cat. It was a bobcat cub. No bigger than a house cat but unmistakably wild. Its sandy fur was mottled with dark spots. White markings circled its eyes, making the gaze even more piercing. Its ears, triangular and tipped with black tufts, flicked forward, alert. And though it stood on small, sturdy legs, there was a slight limp in its hind paw. The cub didn't run. It didn't snarl or bolt. It simply watched. Emma's first instinct was fear. Not because she believed it would attack, but because she knew how delicate the situation was. Bobcats were wild animals. Unpredictable. Protected. And a cub this young? Likely orphaned. Which meant it was scared. Maybe starving. Maybe dying. She slowly backed away and went inside, her breath shallow. Through the window, she watched the cub hobble forward, sniffing around the porch. It looked thin. Its ribs faintly visible beneath the soft fur. Every movement was cautious, as if it wasn't sure if this was a place it could trust. Without thinking too much, Emma opened her fridge and grabbed a leftover piece of roasted chicken. She stepped out and set the meat gently at the edge of the porch. The cub didn't flinch but didn't approach either. It sat down, right there in the grass, and waited. Minutes passed. Finally, as the sun dipped behind the trees, the cub crept forward and took the food. That night, it didn't leave. It curled up beside the porch steps, on the welcome mat, like it belonged. Like it had chosen her. And deep in her chest, something stirred. Something that hadn't stirred in a long, long time. Rules of the wild. The closer you get to the wild, the more it teaches you not just how to observe, but how to respect. Emma didn't sleep much that night. She lay in her small pinewood bed, the cabin dark except for the orange glow of the fireplace. Every creak of the porch boards made her ears perk. She knew it was still out there, curled against the mat just outside her door. A wild bobcat cub. Alone. Wounded. And for some unfathomable reason, choosing to stay. By dawn, she cracked open the door. The air was brisk, mountain cold even in spring. The cub lifted its head slowly. It hadn't fled during the night. Emma crouched a few feet away, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug of hot coffee. Steam rose into the crisp air. "I didn't dream you," she whispered. The cub blinked slowly, ears twitching. It didn't run. And that terrified her more than if it had. Emma spent the next few hours pacing the cabin, researching bobcats on her old laptop. Her signal was weak, but she managed to pull up enough articles to confirm what she suspected. Bobcat kittens usually stayed with their mothers for up to 11 months. This one couldn't be more than 6 months old. If it was already limping, possibly injured, that meant it had little chance of survival out here alone. And most important, humans weren't supposed to intervene. She found the number for Arizona Wildlife Services and made the call. A calm-voiced ranger on the other end listened carefully. "Leave it alone," he advised. "Don't feed it. Don't touch it. It's best for the animal if you let nature take its course. If it's still there after 48 hours, call us again." Emma stared at her reflection in the cabin window after the call ended. Leave it alone? But it had come to her. It had stayed. She went back outside mid-morning. The cub had moved to a shaded spot under the porch steps. Its body was curled, but its ears turned as she approached. She left no food this time. Instead, she sat cross-legged a few feet away with her sketchpad and pencil, pretending to ignore it. Every few minutes, she peeked. The cub was watching her too. She named it Ash, for the smoky gray tones in its fur, and the way it seemed to rise from the forest shadows like something burned and reborn. Over the next 2 days, Ash remained. He moved little, limping slowly between the porch and the birdbath in the yard. He wouldn't take food from her hand, but when she placed it down and stepped away, he crept toward it with quiet hunger. Emma started a new sketchbook, one just for him. She noted every detail: the black rings on his tail, the soft dapples across his flank, the cautious way he licked his paw and cleaned his face after eating. She logged what time he came out, when he rested, what he seemed curious about. The more she watched him, the more she realized he was watching her, too. In a notebook, she wrote one line again and again. This isn't normal. And yet, it feels meant. Still, she never tried to pet him. Never crossed that line. She knew enough about wild things to understand, trust isn't taken. It's offered, slowly, and only by those who've known pain. And in Ash's eyes, she saw the reflection of her own. Wounded. Cautious. But not yet ready to give up. A growing connection. Some bonds aren't built with words or promises, but with silence, trust, and time. By the fourth day, Ash followed her. Not close, never too near, but enough that Emma could feel him. A rustle in the tall grass behind her. The soft crunch of twigs snapping beneath small, padded paws. At first, she thought she imagined it. But every time she glanced over her shoulder, those amber eyes blinked calmly back at her from a distance. She started talking to him, not because she expected a response, but because the words came easier when she spoke them into the wild. "I'm heading to the creek," she'd murmur. "Water's probably clearer after yesterday's rain." Ash would trail behind, quiet as wind, until she reached the water's edge. Then he'd settle a few yards away, crouched behind a cluster of rocks or beneath a bush. Watching. Emma had grown up with pets, dogs, cats, a turtle named Baxter, but this wasn't that. This wasn't ownership. This was something fragile. Something closer to coexistence. One morning, she found a surprise on the porch. Not a toy or a scrap of trash like a domestic cat might bring, but a small, freshly caught rabbit, placed neatly beside the step where she usually sat to drink her coffee. At first, she recoiled. The fur was still damp with morning dew. The animal's eyes were closed, peaceful in a way that twisted her stomach. But then she saw Ash, perched beneath a pine a few yards away, watching. It hit her. He had brought her food. Not stolen scraps. Not scavenged garbage. A gift. She didn't take it inside. Instead, she crouched down, made eye contact, and whispered, "Thank you." From that moment on, something shifted. Ash began to move more freely around the cabin. He lounged in the shade beneath the porch, sometimes napping with his belly half exposed. He'd twitch in his sleep, letting out soft, breathy chuffs that almost sounded like purring. Emma found herself adjusting her routines to fit his rhythm. She left water out in a wide clay bowl. She spoke in lower tones. She stopped playing music aloud. Everything became slower, quieter, more intentional. One day, she sat in the yard sketching, her knees tucked beneath her. She was so focused on shading his ear tufts from memory that she didn't notice he'd crept close. When she finally looked up, Ash was sitting just 6 feet away, head tilted. She held her breath. He didn't move. Neither did she. For 10 full minutes, they sat like that, two creatures, scarred in different ways, sharing the same stillness. And then, slowly, Ash lay down beside her, his chin resting on his paws. No barriers. No fear. Just a growing, inexplicable trust. That night, Emma lit a fire in the pit behind the cabin and watched sparks lift into the pine-dotted sky. Ash sat nearby, his outline flickering in the flames' glow. For the first time in months, she didn't feel alone. And though she knew this couldn't last, that wild things belonged to the forest, not porches, she allowed herself, just for one night, to pretend. Pretend he was hers. Pretend she was whole. Pretend nothing would ever come to take him away. But deep in the woods, something else was stirring. Something that didn't care for fragile bonds or quiet routines. And it was already on its way. A strange scent. The forest gives, but it also warns, if you know how to listen. It started with the birds. They vanished. For days, Emma had filled the feeder outside her window with seed, watching finches squabble and jays flash their vibrant wings. But now, the branches hung silent. No flutter. No calls. Just a heavy, unnatural stillness. Emma noticed it one morning as she sipped her coffee on the porch. The usual chatter of pine squirrels and chickadees was missing. Even the wind seemed to move more cautiously. Ash sat under the porch steps, as always, but his posture had changed. His ears were perked stiffly, nose high in the air. He sniffed once, twice, then let out a low growl that rumbled from his chest like distant thunder. "What is it?" Emma asked quietly, setting her mug down. Ash stood up, body tense. His tail, usually flicking lazily, was rigid and still. He moved a few paces toward the edge of the tree-line and stopped, staring into the woods. Emma followed his gaze but saw nothing. The next morning, she found prints. Large, oval-shaped, deep in the soil. Not bear. Not mountain lion. She recognized the claw marks, coyote. But these weren't lone prints. There were multiple sets. A pack. She called Arizona Game and Fish that afternoon, relaying what she'd found. The ranger on duty, a man named Ron, confirmed recent reports of aggressive coyote behavior in the region, likely due to drought and early fire displacement further north. "They're hungry," he said. "And when prey is scarce, they'll take risks. You got pets? Keep 'em close. Don't leave anything out." Emma's eyes flicked to Ash, curled beside the woodpile. Not a pet. Not domestic. But vulnerable. That night, she moved his water bowl inside the screened porch and reinforced the fencing along the back of the cabin. She brought in her compost bin. She even left her porch light on, casting a yellow halo across the yard. Still, sleep didn't come easy. Sometime after midnight, she awoke with her heart hammering. A sound. Soft. Intentional. She sat up, straining to listen. A faint snap of twigs. A low, whining yelp. Then silence. She threw on a flannel shirt and stepped outside, flashlight in hand. The beam swept across the clearing, nothing. But Ash was gone. "Ash," she called softly, panic rising in her throat. Then, movement. From the shadows near the tree line, he emerged. Limping. Ears flat. His eyes wide and wild. He ran straight to her, body low to the ground, and crouched behind her legs. Emma turned toward the woods. That's when she saw them, 3 sets of glowing yellow eyes reflected in the beam. Coyotes. Lean. Silent. Watching. She didn't yell. Didn't move. She stepped back slowly, Ash pressed to her leg. The coyotes didn't follow. After a long breathless minute, they turned and melted into the trees. Emma locked every door that night. Kept the lights on. Ash didn't sleep under the porch. He slept inside, curled in the corner by the door. And for the first time, Emma let him. Because the forest was shifting. The lines between wild and human were starting to blur. And this time, survival would take both of them. The attack. Fear is louder in the wilderness, but sometimes, love roars louder. The next morning broke with heavy skies, the kind that promised a storm but offered no rain. Emma stood on her porch, mug in hand, staring at the dark line of trees. Ash was curled just inside the screen door, his golden eyes following every sound, every gust of wind. She had barely spoken since the night before. Her thoughts were knotted with what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. The image of those 3 coyotes watching, waiting, clung to her like smoke. "Let's just walk to the stream," she said softly, more to herself than to Ash. She needed to breathe. To clear the fear out of her chest. Ash rose, stretched, and limped toward her. He was favoring the back leg again, still sore, still healing. They took their usual trail down through the pines, skirting the moss-covered rocks and stepping over the dry brush. The stream ran wider after last week's rain, its surface dancing with ripples and light. Emma crouched by the water, refilling her canteen, while Ash stood nearby, ears twitching at every sound. The tension hadn't left him. His body was alert, coiled tight. Then it happened. A snap. Close. Emma jerked upright. From behind a thicket, they came. 3 coyotes, lean and ragged, fur matted with burrs and dust. Their eyes were locked on Ash. Not her. They were silent, no snarls, no barks, just intent. Hungry. Ash stepped forward instinctively, planting himself between Emma and the approaching threat. "No," she whispered. "Ash, no." But he didn't listen. The first coyote lunged. Ash met it head-on. The sounds that followed shattered the stillness, snarls, growls, yelps. Emma screamed, grabbed the only thing nearby, a thick branch, and charged into the fray. "Get back," she shouted, swinging wildly. One coyote snapped at her leg but missed. Another circled, calculating. Ash, bleeding from the shoulder, whipped around and slammed into it with all his weight, knocking it sideways. Emma brought the branch down hard on the back of the nearest coyote. It yelped and scrambled away. Panting, shaking, she stood over Ash, the branch raised. The coyotes hesitated. One growled low, but then, all at once, they backed off, vanishing into the trees. Silence returned, but it wasn't peaceful. It was pulsing, electric, filled with adrenaline. Emma dropped to her knees. Ash was trembling. Blood darkened the fur along his flank. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. "Oh God, oh Ash." She pressed her hands against the worst of the wounds, not even thinking about what came next. All that mattered was him. She tore off her flannel, wrapped it tightly around his shoulder. "We're getting help," she whispered. He let out a low whimper but didn't resist as she scooped him into her arms. He was heavier than he looked, easily 30 pounds, but she carried him the entire way back up the trail. Every step was agony. For both of them. But Emma never stopped. Not once. Because in that moment, something inside her had changed. Ash hadn't just protected her. He had chosen her. And now she would choose him, no matter what. Vet visit and suspicion. Some injuries you can see. Others walk into a room and shatter the silence. The bell over the glass door jingled as Emma pushed into the Flagstaff Animal Emergency Clinic, her arms straining under Ash's weight. The smell of antiseptic hit her like a wave, sharp, cold, clinical. Every head in the waiting room turned. And froze. Because what Emma was carrying wasn't a dog. It was a wild bobcat. Blood matted Ash's fur in thick streaks along his side and shoulder. His breathing was labored, his limbs limp from exhaustion. Emma's flannel shirt, wrapped around him like a makeshift tourniquet, was soaked through with crimson. A vet tech behind the counter sprang to her feet. "What is that?" she gasped. "He's injured. He needs help." "Please," Emma said, nearly breathless. Dr. Lisa Morgan, a tall, no-nonsense woman in her early 40s with graying hair pulled into a tight bun, emerged from the back. Her expression flickered from concern to shock the moment she saw Ash. "That's a Bobcat Cub," she said flatly. "Yes. But he's not dangerous." "Please, he saved my life," Emma pleaded, voice cracking. "Coyotes attacked us near Walnut Creek." Dr. Morgan didn't waste time arguing. She motioned to the gurney. "Get him in here. Now." Emma laid Ash down gently. His eyes fluttered open at her touch but quickly slid shut again. Once inside the treatment room, Lisa and her team moved fast, fluids, gauze, antiseptics. They worked in sync, trained hands assessing wounds and monitoring vitals. "How long have you had him?" Lisa asked without looking up. I don't have him, Emma replied. He found me. About 2 weeks ago. He's been living under my porch. I tried not to interfere at first, I swear. Lisa glanced at her sharply. You fed him. You treated him like a pet. Emma swallowed hard. No. I respected the boundary. But he chose to stay. When Lisa didn't respond, Emma continued, voice trembling. I called Wildlife Services. They told me to leave him alone. But then the coyotes came. He protected me. I couldn't just let him die. There was silence for a long beat, broken only by the beep of a heart monitor. Lisa finally sighed, wiping her hands on a towel. You're going to get a lot of questions for this. Maybe even trouble. You're not supposed to shelter wild animals, no matter the intention. I don't care, Emma said quietly. He matters to me. Lisa looked at her. Not with judgment, but something else. Something quieter. A trace of understanding. He's lucky, she said. So are you. They stood over the small, battered creature lying on the table, wild and wounded, but alive. And for now, that was enough. The viral spark. Some stories don't need a spotlight, they ignite all on their own. 3 days after Ash's emergency surgery, the clinic allowed Emma to visit him in the isolation ward. He lay curled on a thick towel under a warming lamp, stitches along his flank, and 4 taped carefully to his front leg. When she whispered his name, his ears twitched. His eyes opened, slowly, groggily, and for a moment, they held hers. She didn't touch him. She didn't need to. The recognition in that amber gaze was enough. That evening, back at the cabin, the silence felt unbearable. So she opened her laptop. She hadn't posted anything personal in months. But now, her fingers moved with purpose across the keyboard as she typed a long post on a wildlife photography forum she'd once frequented. The title. A bobcat came to my door, and saved my life. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't romanticize. She simply told the truth. How Ash had appeared. How she resisted interfering. How he lingered. How he defended her against 3 wild coyotes, nearly dying in the process. And how, in a world so often broken by fear and separation, something extraordinary had happened. 2 beings from opposite sides of the wild had chosen each other. She ended the post with a photo. Not a dramatic shot. Just a quiet moment, a drawing from her sketchbook, Ash sleeping under the porch, paws tucked in, ears relaxed, safe. Then she hit submit and closed the lid. She didn't expect what happened next. By morning, the post had gone viral. Thousands of views. Hundreds of comments. Wildlife groups. Outdoor magazines. Animal lovers. Conservationists. Debate exploded across threads. Was it dangerous? Was it beautiful? Was it illegal? Was it a miracle? The headline spread to social media. Woman befriends wild bobcat. The bond that shocked Arizona. Some people were outraged. Others inspired. Wildlife experts weighed in, dissecting Emma's every decision. Interviews were requested. Wildlife officials took interest. Even her old co-workers in Phoenix texted her, "Is this really you?" Emma didn't know whether to be proud or terrified. Later that day, her phone rang. A clipped voice on the line introduced herself as a representative from Arizona Fish and Game. "We need to talk about the bobcat," the woman said. Emma's pulse spiked. She expected the worst, accusations, fines, even threats of confiscation. But instead, the woman added, "We've seen the post. And we've had calls, a lot of them. People want to help. We'd like to visit the site. Evaluate the situation. Possibly discuss rehabilitation options, ethical ones. Emma stared at the phone. Rehabilitation, she repeated. For Ash, the voice confirmed. If he's strong enough to return to the wild, we want to give him that chance. Emma looked out her window at the empty porch, her heart both heavy and hopeful. Ash's story had become more than hers. It belonged to the world now. And maybe, just maybe, that world was ready to care. The hardest goodbye. Some goodbyes feel like the end, but they're really just the wild opening its door again. The air was still on the morning they came for him. 2 trucks rolled up the dirt road, tires crunching softly over gravel. One bore the state seal of Arizona Fish and Game. The other was from Wildheart Sanctuary, a wildlife rehabilitation center nestled deep in the mountains beyond Sedona. Emma stood on the porch, arms crossed tightly, watching as the doors opened and 2 specialists stepped out, one in olive green uniform, the other in khaki cargo pants and a faded Wildheart t-shirt. They introduced themselves as Ranger Dana Brooks and Theo Mendez, the sanctuary's lead wildlife handler. Emma didn't respond much. She nodded, offered a tight smile, and led them to the back room where Ash had been resting since being released from the vet's care. Ash lay curled in the blanket-lined crate, awake but still. He didn't hiss. Didn't growl. His golden eyes flicked up at the newcomers, wary, but not wild with panic. Theo crouched beside the crate, his voice low and warm. "Well, aren't you something?" Emma felt a sharp pang in her chest. She hadn't cried when Ash was attacked. She hadn't cried in the clinic. But now, as she watched Theo lift him gently, so gently, into a transport carrier, her eyes brimmed with hot, stinging tears. "He'll be evaluated at the sanctuary," Dana said softly. "Kept in a monitored outdoor habitat, away from people. If he heals fully and shows signs of wild behavior, if he hunts, hides, fears humans again, then he can be released." "And if he doesn't?" Emma asked. "Then he'll stay there. Safe, cared for. But not free." Emma nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Theo closed the carrier door. The soft click felt like a slam. "I'd like a moment," Emma whispered. They stepped out. She knelt beside the crate, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Ash blinked slowly, eyes calm. He didn't shift away. "You saved me," she said, voice trembling. "And I couldn't save your wildness. I don't know if you'll come back. I don't even know if I want you to. But I'll never forget you, Ash. Ever." She slid her sketchbook into the side pocket of the carrier, a page marked, folded. Inside was the first drawing she ever made of him. Ash blinked once. And in that single, unblinking gaze, she swore he understood. When they drove away, the forest didn't stir. No wind. No birdsong. Just the soft weight of absence settling over the porch where he used to sleep. And Emma, arms wrapped around herself, heart open and breaking, let the tears fall. Because love, even for the wild, always comes with a cost. The long silence. It's not the presence of someone that haunts us, it's the shape they leave behind. The cabin was quieter than it had ever been. The porch, once guarded by soft paw steps and amber eyes, sat empty in the sun. The water bowl Emma used to refill each morning stayed bone dry. The sketchbook lay untouched on the kitchen table, still open to the final page she had slipped into Ash's crate. Days passed. Then weeks. Emma tried to settle back into her old rhythms. Coffee at dawn. Walks to the stream. Long afternoons in the greenhouse. But everything felt out of place, like a picture hung crooked and left that way. The forest was still the same, but she was not. Each time she walked the trail to Walnut Creek, she'd glance over her shoulder, half expecting to hear him again, the soft rustle, the cautious footfall. She even caught herself leaving the screen door cracked, as if some part of her still believed Ash might return. He didn't. Instead, she filled her time differently. Emma began volunteering once a week at the Wildheart Sanctuary, where Ash now lived in a spacious, protected habitat far from the public. She wasn't allowed to approach him directly, not anymore. But sometimes she'd see him from a distance, crouched in the tall grass, watching birds with that same quiet intensity. The handler said he was recovering well. His wounds had healed. He had begun hunting small prey again, mice, squirrels, things left for him in covered drop spots. They were hopeful. Maybe, if his instincts stayed sharp enough, he'd be released come fall. Emma didn't ask for more. Just knowing he was alive, safe, and still wild where it counted, that was enough. She wrote again. She drew. She shared her story with students and nature clubs, turning their questions into conversations about trust, boundaries, and respecting the lives that exist beyond our fences. And through it all, the memory of Ash stayed with her, not like a scar, but like a shadow that moved beside her. Not painful. Not haunting. Just real. A reminder that sometimes, love doesn't mean holding on. Sometimes, it means letting go. 1 year later. Time doesn't erase the wild, it teaches you how to live beside its silence. Spring returned to Flagstaff with the scent of pine needles and thawing earth. Snowmelt trickled down the creek, and the first blush of wildflowers began to bloom along the cabin trail. A full year had passed since Ash had come limping out of the forest and into Emma's life, and just as quietly, left it again. Emma stood barefoot on the porch, a mug of tea warming her hands. Her hair was longer now, her skin kissed by the sun after a season spent mostly outdoors. The cabin, once a sanctuary of solitude, had become something else entirely, a space of renewal. She no longer kept the porch light on at night. No longer filled a water bowl or checked the yard for pawprints. But she still watched the woods with soft eyes. Still listened. Still remembered. The sketchbook had grown thick with pages, portraits of bobcats, forests, firelight. She had started selling prints online, donating part of the proceeds to Wildheart Sanctuary. One of her pieces, Ash crouched in profile, mid-hunt, dappled in early dawn light, had even been featured in a local gallery. She hadn't visited the sanctuary in months. They told her Ash had been moved to a larger wilderness enclosure, one step closer to full release. He was strong. Elusive. And bonded to anyone. He had become what nature intended again. And she was proud. Still, today felt different. A familiar restlessness pulled at her, like the ache in her legs before a long hike. She felt the tug of memory, the need to return to where it began. So she packed a small satchel with a thermos, her journal, and a folded drawing. She left the cabin without locking the door. As she stepped into the trees, the forest welcomed her like an old friend. The trail to Walnut Creek hadn't changed, worn, soft, shaded with tall pines. But Emma had. She walked it now not with searching, but with peace. It had been 1 year. And though she didn't expect anything to happen at the end of that trail, her heart still beat a little faster with each step. Just in case. Because some stories don't end, they echo. Some goodbyes are not endings, they're invitations to meet again, on wilder terms. The clearing by Walnut Creek looked exactly as it had a year ago. The water sang over the smooth stones, cool and clear. Sunlight filtered through the pines in golden beams, casting soft shadows across the moss. Emma sat on a flat rock near the water's edge, her journal open in her lap, the thermos steaming gently beside her. She didn't write. Not yet. She listened. To the wind brushing the treetops. To the birds returning to their branches. To the ache beneath her ribs that never truly left. Then, she felt it. A shift. The sudden stillness of the birds. The crack of a branch. A hush that settled over the clearing like snowfall. Emma turned slowly. There, standing at the tree line, partially hidden by a cluster of brush, was a shape she knew better than her own reflection. Sleek, lean. The spots along his flanks more defined now, muscles rippling under a coat thick and clean. His ears twitched, his eyes, those wild, amber eyes, locked with hers. Ash. He didn't move forward. Didn't make a sound. He just watched her. Her breath caught. The journal slipped from her lap, forgotten. She didn't dare blink. They stared at each other across the quiet distance. And for a moment, time didn't move. She didn't call his name. Didn't reach out. She simply placed the folded drawing, one of the first she ever made of him, on the rock beside her, anchoring it with a smooth stone. A breeze lifted the edge of the paper. Ash blinked once, then turned his head. With the same quiet grace that defined him, he stepped backward into the trees. Not hurried. Not afraid. Just, done. Emma didn't follow. She watched until the forest swallowed him again, until all that remained were rustling leaves and a flickering shadow. Then she smiled, soft, full, unbroken. Because he had come. Because she had seen him one last time. Because even the wild, when it loves you, finds its way back. She picked up her journal and began to write, not the end of a story, but its continuation. One line at a time. One echo at a time. And the forest, listening, kept her secret. Ash's story isn't just about a wild animal and a woman, it's about what happens when we let go of fear and choose to meet the unknown with openness and respect. In a world that's often too quick to divide what is wild from what is human, this quiet bond reminds us that connection can grow in the most unexpected places. Whether it's with a person, a creature, or a part of ourselves we've forgotten, trust is earned, not forced. And sometimes, the greatest love we can give is the freedom to return to the world on one's own terms. So here's a challenge for you. Look around your life, what are you holding too tightly? What would happen if you let go, just enough to let something or someone grow into what they were meant to be? If this story touched you, and you're someone who believes in the beauty of second chances, untamed connections, and quiet courage, then join us at Paw Prints and Stories. This is where the wild and the human meet, one paw print at a time. And next time you step into the world, ask yourself, what if the wild found you? Would you be ready to answer its call?